suicide rate of ex-servicemen is almost 20% higher than in other Australian men, according to new research from the Institute of Health and Welfare. Veterans under the age of 30 are particularly at risk, dying at twice the rate of their peers outside the Defence Force. Since 2001, 419 male veterans have died by suicide. Women who have also served register higher rates of suicide than the general population, but lower than their male counterparts. Joining me now is Darren Chester, the Minister for Veterans Affairs. Minister, thanks very much for joining us. Some of those figures are absolutely shocking. What does this report make clear to you?
Well, great to be with you. And the report builds on ongoing research we've received from the AIHW over previous years. And it indicates that in 2017, the number of suicides amongst our veteran community was 42 for that calendar year. And over the period of about, I think, 17 years it's been reporting to us now, the average has been around about 30 to 35 per year, which obviously, for me as a minister, the only acceptable number is zero. The only acceptable number for the veteran community and for the broader community is zero. So we're working with the ex-service communities, with families, within Defence as well, on how we can improve not only the way veterans receive services once they leave, but also what work we can do in terms of resilience while they're in service, while they're in the ADF, and then during that very important transition phase. So these numbers, I accept, are startling, but it's building on a whole lot of evidence we've developed now over the last few years where we understand where the greatest risk factors are, and we've been targeting our resources through the Department of Veterans Affairs at the greatest risks.
Okay, so I mean, just running through some of those stats again. 21 women took their lives since 2001. 419 men since 2001, but 10% of that number, so about 42, took their own lives in 2017 alone. So that is just staggering in itself. Minister, what is going to change?
I think it's important when we look at those numbers, we're talking 2017, a lot of changes have occurred since then, so it's a bit of a lag indicator, I guess, and I just want to say that since that date we've brought in a range of new initiatives following several other inquiries that have been reporting to the Parliament, and some of those changes have included free mental health care for life. So through the Open Arms Counselling Service, all veterans can receive free mental health care for life. We've also introduced what is known as a veteran payment, so any veteran coming forward with a mental health liability claim receives a payment automatically, and that came about because we'd had veterans who had made claims and waited too long to receive any benefit at all, and in fact had taken their own lives before they'd received that judgment of their eligibility. So there are a couple of major changes. Also, there's been a lot of work now with the the Defence Force, on improving the transition process, because the feedback from some of the younger veterans in particular is that they were leaving and weren't well prepared for civilian life. But I do want to emphasise as well that for the vast majority of people who serve in the military, that service gives them good skills, leadership, teamwork, problem solving, a whole range of skills that are very easily transferred to civilian life, and they go on to very successful careers. But for some, extra support is needed, and we need to be better all the time at targeting the people who need that extra support and making sure the supports are available to them, the services are available to them in their own community. It's a real challenge for us right around Australia right now in terms of access to health services in a lot of our smaller regional communities is a bit difficult.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But Minister, I mean, we deal with this issue a fair bit on our show, and we have talked about the particular issue of very expensive lawyers being employed by your own department, the Department of Veterans Affairs, taking on vulnerable soldiers. So will that change?
Well, I think you need to really explore that question more broadly. We provide more than $11 billion of support to veterans and their families every year. The vast majority of claims go through without any need for lawyers to be involved at all. There are cases,
but you've still spent in excess of $15 million taxpayer dollars, right, over the past few years taking on ex-soldiers who are trying to get compensation.
Well, what I'm trying to describe to you is the vast majority of cases go through without any involvement of lawyers or anyone else. So,
but there's still a lot. $15 million is a fair bit is a big legal bill.
Well, Well, I'm just going to give you a little bit of context for you. There's $11.2 billion in benefits and support services to provide to veterans per year. Yes, the Department of Veterans Affairs does have to hire lawyers from time to time for some of the more complex cases. We do have an obligation, obviously, to the Australian taxpayers to make sure we're spending their money properly and effectively to legitimate claims. Now, I say to you now that if a veteran comes forward with a legitimate claim and it can be processed as quickly as possible, we see obviously the real benefits to them in terms of their own well-being, and that's what we're aiming to do.
Do you accept that that's not good for mental health of soldiers who have been taken on by lawyers employed by your department?
Well, I think if you're taking the example of other minority of cases which are far more complex than the average case and it requires some legal advice or legal involvement. The vast majority of cases don't involve lawyers. What I'm trying to explain to you is that we're providing support now to 288,000 veterans and their families, and the latest reports we've received from our client base, people, the veterans and their families, is that the vast majority believe where DVA has transformed itself in recent years, become more of a beneficial approach to our veterans, has worked well. So I've got no argument with you in terms of have we had problems in the past, but I would put to you that the transformation that's occurring has been well received by the veteran community.
When you say minority of cases, what sort of a number do you have?
I'd have to get back to you on the exact numbers because there's a conflict resolution process that actually ends up, may, in a very small minority of cases, end up in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. I don't have the number off the top of my head, I'm sorry. But what it's saying to you is the vast majority go through a normal claims process, maybe involving an advocate, a volunteer advocate from the RSL or other ex-service organisations. And one of my challenges is to try and fast track or streamline that process so that people aren't waiting too long, so their claims are properly being assessed and they receive the benefits they're entitled to, and that's one of our real challenges. I'm not suggesting to you for a second that everything is perfect in terms of the way the system's working, but what I'm putting to you is that the transformation, the digitisation of records has been very successful in bringing more veterans forward, receiving more benefits and being properly supporting the community.
Okay, Minister, just a couple of issues before I let you go. Has not been a good week for your government. Was Pauline Hanson underestimated?
I'm not sure whether it's underestimated. The negotiations, I think, that were occurring amongst the Senate team were that she was supportive of the legislation, and it's up to Pauline to explain her change of heart. I mean, explain to the small businesses in particular in Queensland, which she claims to represent, why she's flipped on them. I mean, we need to see the unions held to account, particularly on workplaces where they're damaging the viability, the profitability of our small business sector.
Is your government, though, guilty of assuming that the deal was done?
Well, I wasn't part of negotiations. What I'm saying to you was there was expectation, I guess, that the negotiations were going well, and the One Nation Party indicated they were supportive up until the last minute. But I mean, the questions are really for Pauline Hanson. The small business community in Queensland and throughout Australia wants extra protection in terms of some of this lawlessness that's going on, particularly in the construction industry, which is adding to their costs and undermining their profitability.
How distracting has the Morrison-Fuller-Taylor fiasco been?
Well, the Labor Party all this week in the Parliament, in the House of Reps, has been playing tactics every day to disrupt the operation of the House. I mean, even yesterday, I found it quite extraordinary. They tried to silence Philip Thompson, the veteran from Herbert, the seat up near Townsville there, obviously in North Queensland, tried to silence him as a tactic when he was talking about veterans' mental health issues. It was a bizarre thing to do. So they've been playing tactics and we've been focused on the big issues that matter to all Australians.
But was it appropriate for Scott Morrison to call the Commissioner?
Well, the Prime Minister has made a whole range of explanations to the Parliament and to the media on his actions, and those explanations stand for themselves. I'm not going to indulge in more commentary on the issue. The Prime Minister has made it very clear what he did, and so has Minister Taylor. So those explanations have been given to the Australian public in the Parliament.
Does Angus Taylor have your support?
I'm the Minister for Veterans Affairs. He's the Minister for Emissions Reductions. I mean, it's not for me to tell.
Yeah, but still, I'm just asking. You know, is he still up to the task?
Well, of course, he's up to the task. He's doing the job on a daily basis. This investigation will occur, and it's an ongoing investigation, I understand. And Angus Taylor's doing his job.
Yeah, granted. It's not your portfolio, but just thought I'd put the question out there. Darren Chester, Minister for Veterans Affairs. Appreciate your time this morning.